humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you are humble, if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then people will embrace you.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Dr. Margie Oleson is a renowned expert in team performance and organizational dynamics, specializing in helping teams achieve high levels of productivity and growth. With a background in psychology and organizational development, Margie brings a unique blend of expertise in human behavior and business strategy. Throughout her career, Margie has worked with numerous organizations across various industries, guiding them to optimize their team's potential and create a culture of excellence. Her approach emphasizes the importance of open communication, cross-functional alignment, and continuous learning to drive organizational success. Margie is the founder of Olsen Consulting, a firm dedicated to helping teams and leaders unlock their full potential. And I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. Dr. Oleson, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I've been stalking you in a good way on social media. I watched some other podcasts that you were on and all that. And I think your agent reached out to me and suggested you, and I always check them out. I'm like, oh yeah, I just looked at the email, like, oh yeah, she's a perfect fit, And
That's
so
great.
Fortunately, the stars aligned and you were able to take time out of your busy schedule to come here today. So listen, the intro, very, very brief. You got a rich background. Can you give us a little bit more? What more do we need to know about Dr. Margie Oleson?
So my origin story, everyone has one, is that I didn't want to become an entrepreneur and I didn't want to have my own business and I didn't want to coach leaders. I really thought that organizations had it all together. They're the experts. People get hired and promoted because they're theoretically so great. And after decade upon decade of struggling in organizations. And then I went to school and realized, well, the information is available to us. So then what is going on with organizations? And finally I said, okay, I need to come out of behind the place where I'm having an internal role and try to correct some of the challenges that I experienced, which were multiple layoffs, even firings, or just difficult, even toxic cultures, toxic environments for my particular team, my particular leader, that I didn't want anyone else to have to deal with in the future. And so I thought, what can I do about this? Went back to school and learned, actually, we know what to do. So now I'm here. My passion is to help leaders do that because it is accessible to them. They're just not tapping into it.
I love it. Well, thank you for that. And it leads into my next question I always ask, but you already answered part of it. Just to clarify for the audience, I always ask people, what do you do professionally? What does your company do? Who are your clients and what do you help them solve or get better at? So to the extent that you haven't answered that, would you please let us know?
Sure. So I have worked in a variety of industries, most actually, because I came up through the ranks. You and I were talking about having a military background. I started as a secretary at age 20 and learned about being an administrative person inside of an organization, working for a leader, and that leader had a leader, and the leader's leader had a leader. So I learned a lot about the structure, and I watched in the military, the governance is in place and things are logically flowing down. And that seemed like it made sense to me up to a point. And then I went out into the corporate world and it felt like there was just a lot of variation. And so I went to school and earned a bachelor's as a returning adult, earned a bachelor's degree in organizational management and communications, got some information and thought, there's something here, had done leadership roles and really struggled and watched organizations struggle with how can they perform and lead. And each industry that I was in, 20 different industries, the issues were very similar, actually, very, very similar. So then I went on and got my master's in organizational management. And again, learned that there's a lot of information out there at our fingertips if we grab for it. And as a matter of fact, many of the podcasts, the articles, the books that you can find about being an effective leader, those are based on similar principles. Those are some of the art and science of it from decades, practically centuries ago. And so then I went on after going through multiple layoffs and firings, as I said, and being in everything from fintech, IT, retail. I live in an area where there's a multiple Fortune 500 headquarters. And in each different industry, they struggled with some of the similar issues. And I wondered, why do we hire and promote leaders that aren't being effective? I actually really didn't know. But for each of the companies, they had similar challenges. And so once I earned my doctorate and learned a lot, and we can talk about that, learned a lot about what I feel like we can do to help leaders, then I began working at the leadership team level as well as the individual coaching for the leader at the C-suite, at senior VPs, boards, startups, because the way to set up to be an effective leader is similar regardless of your size. If you're a small company, that 20 people, that is your team. And then how you set up your organization follows those principles. If you're 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, you are a team of teams of teams. You are an organization of a network of a bunch of organizations and can follow all of those same principles regardless of your type of industry, your locations, and your size.
I love it. Yes, I love it. And I agree with so much of what you said. It's been, for what it's worth, your experience dovetails with mine as far as the promoting untrained leaders. It's the rule rather than the exception in corporate America. And I just don't know what it's going to take for corporate America to realize we wouldn't put someone on a machine in a factory. We wouldn't hire a finance person unless they were a trained finance or accounting individual. Why would we promote somebody to a leadership role at every level who's received no leadership training whatsoever?
And what you just said is the kind of thing that is not being talked about. Although people are talking about it a little bit behind the scenes and they're thinking it. So in the deep recesses of their mind, they're thinking it. But a leader, him or herself, they are reluctant. It's really challenging for them to say out loud, I would like some help. I'm not prepared. Because if they say that, it sounds like they don't add value. That's not true. Right. That would be the same with your finance person. If the finance person wasn't educated, if they didn't understand financial formulas and the whole approach, we would not judge them for not having that. We expect them to go get an education to do that. But leaders somehow are hearing the message that they need to bring everything that they have and make it up as they go along. And what's interesting is I've worked with companies where a leader and the next level up and the next level up, all three of those leadership levels are secretly struggling with how to do this leadership thing. And they can't talk about it out loud because it might make the organization think they made a mistake when they promoted them or they made a mistake when they hired them. And so there are some things that we want to have in place. And leaders, the good news is you can develop as an effective leader through the processes that I use with teams while you're doing your work. You don't have to leave. You don't have to go off and take a class. You don't have to go join a program somewhere else. I have built the entire curriculum around doing the actual work. We don't even do role playing. We don't do theoretical. We don't do case studies. I have built an entire program around starting with where you are. Wherever you are. And then we grab the low-hanging fruit and solve the initial crises while we're understanding who's on the team and what are the goals that you float up underneath, and then what are the goals of your team, and then what are the goals of your team members, and then we go on from there to establish all kinds of clarity and alignment and practice, and I observe, and we fix your meetings right away, and we fix the way that you understand how each other is doing and the conversations leaders are having with the individual team member. We fix that right away, and pretty soon you have freed up time and energy and developed a little little bit of confidence, and in that process are learning how to be a leader, but you didn't have to feel like you were going back to school. You were actually learning on the job.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, listen, this is a hypothetical, if all of a sudden the power was going to go out and we had a couple minutes left, I'd say, all right, before you go, Margie, give me your philosophy of leadership. At least share that with the audience. What would you say, an executive summary of Dr. Olson's philosophy of leadership?
Well, the reality is that leadership is born and it's made. And so it's both. So you can have some traits that lend themselves better to leadership, but the truth is we can all become better leaders. You can be an extrovert and be an effective leader, introvert. You can be a morning person, evening person. You can be an expert in your field. You can be someone who's just really good at organizations. I believe that what leaders are missing is they're coming to work every day thinking that they're the problem. And the truth is their brain is doing what brains do. So I've built my entire practice on recognizing that the brain is spending 99% of its time doing all the old stuff. It does not want to change. It doesn't want you to grow. It doesn't want you to get better. It doesn't want you to do meetings differently, because then that's going to take up, precious space for the things that might be needed to keep you alive. The combination of how we learn and how we commit to memory and then how we develop habits, your leadership day, those are all habits. And when you have heard that culture cannot be changed, that's actually not true. You change your habits, you change the collective of how you work together and how you lead, and your culture will change. So focus on those things that you didn't realize were the most important: how we think, how we learn, how we have habits, understand the theory about what we've learned over 100 years about organizations and dynamics, and then we can help you become a better leader by creating new habits.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. And I appreciate your thoughts on born or made and all of that. I agree with it. I do think that people of all stripes, introvert or extrovert, can lead. In fact, I was just talking this morning with an executive in a company, and he actually was in my organization when I worked at the publicly traded company I was in for 15 years. He was in my organization for over a decade. And he mentioned, Mike, I'm an introvert by nature. And I let him talk, and I said, this is probably going to surprise you, Keith, but every test that I take, personality test, says I'm an introvert. He's like, what? No way, because he's seen me talk in front of a couple thousand people. You see me in meetings and all of that. And I'm like, I'm an introvert. I said, I bleed energy when I'm out there talking to people and all of that. I love it. I think I'm good at it. But part of me can't wait to get home to read a book alone for myself for about an hour. I said, so don't beat yourself up for being an introvert. There's all sorts of good ones out here. Introvert, extrovert, it's a matter of what you bring to the table when you're in front of people. What are you making happen and all of that? Any thoughts?
Well, I would say that that's the kind of conversations we should be having at work. What you just said is perfectly true. It's very calm. It's not a problem. It's a reality. And if we could come out into the light about leadership is not necessarily just handed to you, or you're expected to make it up as you go along. If we can just talk about leadership the way we would talk about the technology or talk about the building, the location, just make it normal. Normalize that some persons have this particular leadership aspect and some persons have this over here. And the way I do coaching is the meeting you where you are includes all the ways that you show up, which is different than the person standing next to you. And the themes, how we know how to stand up an organizational team and a leadership, those themes, the art and science of it, have been out there for 4 decades plus. And the tried and true, and now it's settled research. And so you take that information, but then you customize it for your style, for the location of your team members, for the type of team members that you have in the industry. And so you want the foundation to be set so that your style differences and your personality differences and the differences of your industry and your organization then can be addressed.
I agree with that. Well, listen, it's obvious to the audience you have a very rich background, a lot of experience to your earlier statement, a lot of industry experience and all that, military. So you've observed, worked with developed, interacted with a whole bunch of leaders, Dr.
Correct.
Olson. So I want to ask a two-sided of the coin question here. The first side is, let's talk about the most effective leaders you've ever dealt with in one form, directly or indirectly. We're talking about the top 10% of the top 10%. So the very best. Can you identify any traits, habits, and skills and other qualities that most of the very best seem to have in common?
Well, I always start with get set up first, because I think it's really hard for leaders to show what they can do when they are in an environment that isn't working for them. They don't even know it. They're in that environment. They're the fish in the water, and they don't even realize that the way they're set up is not for success. So they're, kind of berating themselves, or they're feeling pressure, or they're being judged when it's not them personally, it's the structure. So once we bring in the right structure, and we apply what we know about the least amount of things that you need to do to lead and to run a team and to have a team, then the best leaders that I've worked with, their traits are, number one, they are open to this. So I would say the number one trait that that sets leaders apart from others is self-awareness. And I define self-awareness as, if we're talking about me, I understand the effects that what you say and do have on me, and I understand the effects of what I say and do on you and the people around us. So that's my, definition of self-awareness. So not everybody has that. And some of the ways to grow self-awareness are: live a life that has a lot of growth and development. Go to therapy. Be in a recovery program. Be in a leadership program where you actually have a chance to go inward and reflect. You're trying to get your inside thoughts and feelings to be much more out loud. So self-awareness is that I am now able to understand what I'm feeling right now and what I'm thinking. And we have not had this in the workplace. So the leaders that I've worked with that are top of the line are open to the reality that they do bring their whole selves into the mix. Now, I will say, one of the positives to come out of the very difficult global pandemic is we did start talking a lot more about feelings, and we did start talking a lot more about dynamics, and we started talking a lot more about interactions. Unfortunately, we're not interacting as much because we're at home still remotely, and those numbers are going to have to change. We can talk about that. But so when you appreciate that your whole self comes into the mix, then you can learn more about if you lose your temper, or if you cut people off and do all the talking, or if you let everybody just do what they want and they're not rowing in your direction. They're all rowing off in different directions. So a leader is open, number one, to the reality that they bring their whole selves. And then number two, to hear someone like me and other experts talk about what they need to do. So the leaders that I've worked with that it didn't work, and I won't, which is why I set up my business so that we go through the process to see if this is going to be a good fit, is I can't do it for them and I can't hand it to them. And it's not going to happen in a week. So the process to change from where you're at, not knowing leadership or not being in an environment where leaders are developed and trained, is the change to go from there to over here is going to require several steps. So the individual needs to be willing to say, I will do those steps. I will open myself up to observation. I will try some things. They also have the willingness to be experimental, because not everything is going to work for you personally. So if we're changing your meetings and there's some things you have to do about who to not invite anymore, there's a way to do that. And maybe at one company it works better to do it this way, and another company it works better to do that. So you have to try some things. And then I would just follow that up with just an appreciation of the anatomy of the brain and the way we learn and our habits, all of those. And then also being willing to fail, have something not go well, use whatever words you can to feel good about this. But if you're the kind of leader who feels like wherever you're at in the organization, it is not okay to show vulnerability. It's not okay to show that you're experimenting. It's not okay to show that what you tried didn't work, or what you did actually completely failed. And now here's how you're going to regroup. If that's not okay for you, if you can't do that, then that's not the kind of leader who has the traits that are needed to manage in the world we have today. Now, Doesn't mean we can't work together next year, but a person wants to take their own journey and go to therapy and read books and join a group, a mastermind group where there's other leaders. Get your own house in order. Even if your organization does not support that, or it's not okay to make mistakes, or it's not okay to put your head up and try some things and explore and experiment, work on yourself, and then you can find an organization that will. But the leaders that are willing to do all of that, those are the high performing leaders.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. Now let's talk about the flip side of it. Every environment I've been in, and I think you're going to agree with this, every environment I've been in, even the U.S. Marine Corps, much vaunted for their leadership programs and all of that, there are still bad leaders at the far end. And then more toward the center, less effective, ineffective leaders, It doesn't mean they're bad people. So I'm sure you've observed some, maybe not bad leaders, but less effective for whatever reason. This person is just not hitting the mark as a leader and all of that. You probably observed multiple now at this point in your career. So same question, are there any traits, habits, skills, quirks, whatever, that most of the least effective or ineffective leaders also seem to share in common?
Mm-hmm. Well, you said it really nicely. I'm going to say it more plainly. I've had terrible bosses. I personally have reported to people who were terrible, toxic, mean, yelling, having just terrible behaviors at work. And what I observed, we can think about this in our personal lives. When somebody's acting out in our personal life and it's a secret, nobody's talking about it, it's the elephant in the room and nobody's mentioning it or managing it, it continues. And it continues, and the people around feel weird about it. They feel really uncomfortable. It's the gaslighting. I'm not seeing what I'm actually seeing, and you're the problem, or you don't. There's no room for you to even talk about the elephant. And so I had I narrowed my dissertation topics down to two. One was, okay, I've been out here in organizations for 30 years. I now just went through 4 years of coursework and we know everything we need to know about effective leadership and developing and having effective teams. Why are organizations struggling still after all this time? That was one topic. The other topic was, why do we hire and promote bad bosses? And the only reason I didn't choose that is because I didn't want to spend the next 2 years thinking about bad bosses. And so I chose the highly effective, high-performing leadership and teams, and it was a very fun process. But the bad bosses piece is about denial and the covering up of real information. So if you're an organization and you have the culture, the habits of not having real conversations. You're not having hard conversations. You're not even having real conversations. There are teams that I work with that each individual member of the team is rowing their boat in completely different directions. And after a couple of years of the team being stood up this way, the leader just only complains about it to somebody else. In 2 years, they haven't figured out how to have an open, real conversation about what we're supposed to be doing and who's doing what. And so when you don't have that kind of openness, when you're not being clear, when you haven't made sure that everybody on your team knows what they need to know and has what they need to do to be successful, and then you're not chatting with them every single week about how that's going and how you think it's going, you're missing it. And you're going to have the equivalent of putting something under a rug that piles up and piles up and piles up. And pretty soon your culture does get set. You really have to work hard to implode that and blow it up because you have taught yourself and other people to not be real, to not be honest, to hide failure. God forbid, hide failure. So an example of this, I worked with a company, Fortune 500 company who had, they were in the IT department. This was the head person of the IT department. And they had been there for a while and had been promoted around in different parts of the company and then finally found themselves leading IT. And all they did for our first few coaching sessions was complain and complain and complain. So rather than call them on that, because if I say to you, wow, Mike, you're really complaining a lot, your brain's just going to go, danger, danger, can't hear the next thing she says. So we use the dynamics and psychology and the way coaching is the way that someone can actually take in information. And we began to build clarity with their team members. And this was the IT leadership team. So once we started doing that, there actually was a person on a performance improvement plan who just hadn't been let go yet. And they were, the company was having a hard time because they didn't have a data, they didn't have an audit, a trail of paperwork to say why, but they just felt like this person wasn't performing. They didn't need me to do anything about that. They weren't asking me for advice on that. But I did ask a couple questions, but I stayed in my lane. And then we started to add tools and processes for having the same information with each other as a team. So what are the leader's goals? And then how does each person on the team fit into those goals? What are their goals? And then do they have what they need to do that? And are you checking in with them every single week to have them know what you think about how they're doing? And so they use one of my tools for just monitoring the difference or the having a goal and then the progress on that, which sounds so simple. I wish it was rocket science. It's not. As soon as we implemented that and they started using that, first of all, people started loving their meetings. Their meetings started to have energy. But this person quietly came off the performance improvement plan because what they were doing was not the problem. But the leader didn't know this, and the leader was sort of bothered by a couple conversations that had happened, and the leader was dealing with different information. So and in this case, we had a victory with the meetings piece, but the person who I was coaching was not able to be successful in the longer term because they really were not able to show up with that curiosity and that openness to be, imperfect and to try some things and to talk out loud about what they're thinking and feeling. They were not able to get there, and we were not able to work together in that realm.
Yeah. Thank you for that robust answer. Thank you. A lot of wisdom packed into that. I don't know if you can see I'm taking notes as you're talking here. So thank you for
well,
that.
And if you wouldn't mind me just interjecting, to people that are hearing me talk, I promise you, it sounds simpler than what I'm saying. It's the simple, not easy, because you do have to slow down and you have to set up different ways of doing the most basic things, like how you talk to each other and how you have your meetings and how you track what you're supposed to be doing and how you track what you're doing. But I promise you, it's not so difficult that it's going to make everything be so much harder. It actually will make it easier. And the only reason you haven't been doing it up to now is because you haven't been exposed to it, or you tried it, but you didn't try it in a way for how we really make changes, like new habits, doing change management, all of that. So you can do this. It's not complicated. It just requires attention and some changing.
Yes, I agree with that. Well, your answers were so profound on the individual, the leader, as a person. I want to have the same question, so to speak, on leadership teams, yes. Organizations. So I would ask, have you identified any leadership, cultural, operational, and other attributes and qualities that are common to the very best, most successful, most effective organizations that you've been involved with?
Yeah. So, and I would say for the organizations you've heard about that are successful, they may not be successful inwardly. They may have success metrics, but that doesn't mean people like working there. So the ones that I have worked with, let us start with just the basics. For an effective team, you need 5 things. And imagine starting at the top of a funnel and then working your way down. So you're going to do big picture at the top of the funnel, and then you're going to refine and refine and refine. And at the top of the funnel is, what industry are you in? What environment are you in? What work do you do? What work does the organization do? And then come down one level. And then what are the goals? And let's take a year. Okay. So let's say, what are the 2025 goals? And again, anyone listening to this, you can just jot this down and do this right now. You don't need anything special to do what I'm talking about. What are the goals of the organization? And then I'm an SVP. What are my goals that get the C-suite to have the CEO to have their goals met? So what are my part of those collective goals? And then for my team, what are their individual goals. So do they know what my goals are and what are their individual goals? And then what processes, so now we're coming farther down the funnel, what processes do we have in place to make that happen? And they can't be 10 years ago processes or even 5 years ago processes. When you update your goals, you need to update your processes. You need to always be looking at where you can optimize the way that you're working and the ways that you have things getting done in the business. Because if you let go of noticing, it's like in your kitchen, something's going to happen and you missed it because you thought you could just coast. There's no coasting, but your processes help you. So you want to make sure that they're in place and that they're constantly being refreshed and stay current. And then at the lower end of the funnel is relationships. And we don't use that word much in organizations. And yet, if you think about it, you got relationships all day long. That's all you have. You're the people. You have partnerships, you have interactions, or you have neglect. You have not being together. So when you put in place the pieces that I just described, you have now freed up so much time and space in your brain, in your collective, to start getting at the issues that you haven't been able to get to because you're always in crisis. You're always mired. First of all, anyone who hears me right now, if you don't like your meetings and they are on your calendar all day long, you can fix that. You don't have to have that much pain. You can fix your meetings. Well, if you did the pieces that we're talking about and free up time and energy, you would have time and space to fix your meetings. Culture, like we said, the reason it's hard to change culture is because you have to change people's habits and leaders have to lead. Once you put these pieces in place, you've now freed up time to actually look at where your culture is. And so organizations that are hitting it out of the park have put the past behind them, and they look out over their organizational landscape, and their leadership looks like the global world that we live in. And there are people of all different backgrounds coming up to the table and bringing their acumen, their experience, their own culture. You have much better metrics, much better outcomes when you have diversity at every level of leadership. You may have heard that as a metric, but how do you make that happen? Well, get your processes in order, fix your meetings, start telling your people what they're supposed to be doing, make sure their boats are rowing in the right direction. And now you and the leadership team can spend time looking at culture and seeing what you need. And the world we live in, coming out of a global pandemic, so many people are remote. If you haven't solved that problem, it's because you're fighting fires instead. If you're having issues with 5 generations in the workplace and you're not really sure where to go with that or what to do, you want time to focus on that, get your other pieces in place. If you are still coming off of supply chain issues, or you're trying to figure out how to be the business that you are in the industry, in the world that we live in, free up time and space so you can have those conversations, because the other benefit of having leaders that are developing and having a diverse workforce is the answers are there. You have people right now on your team who have not felt comfortable saying out loud things that could help you. But once you as a leadership team, first of all, get very clear and open, take the time for everyone to be able to go around and speak for everyone else. I, on a leadership team, know everybody's goals. And I know how they're doing, and I know how they can help me, and I know how I can help them. And at any given point in an elevator, I can speak to the entire team members, all of them, our goals and where we're at. That's a well-oiled machine that all of a sudden starts to be a team unit that is functioning much better. Once you get to that point and you have an increased amount of cohesion and you start to develop trust, now you're so much better at solving those bigger issues. And that's one of the reasons you haven't gotten there now is you didn't have the people relationships to do that, and you were fighting fires instead of taking that time. So those are the traits of a leadership team, is they've figured out, well, let's just apply the art and science. Let's do the thing that we can do, and then let's start leading. And also, these leaders did not plan to become a leader and not enjoy their day. It is hard to get up every day and be a leader when you can't be open about how much you're struggling, and you don't have your stuff set up so that you can be effective. These leadership teams that I've worked with who have gotten past this, all of a sudden there's energy and there's laughter and there's tears, and it becomes a real, authentic, but very engaging, dynamic environment, and you kind of look forward to going to work.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you've said so much that I think is so actionable. And I like the phrase you use, simple. Nothing you said was rocket science. they're not easy, for some reason. A lot of these things are simple, but not easy. You have to have intelligent determination and focus and all that. Well, we have to go to the dark side too. Are there any cultural, leadership, organizational, and other attributes that you have seen common to most ineffective or bad, non-performing organizations?
They follow the rules that we were trying to learn on the playground growing up, which is if you blame, you're missing an opportunity to find out what's really going on. If you feel like a victim, like everything is happening to you, you're going to miss the chance to uncover more about yourself and about the people around you. Like you said, we would never hire the finance person if they weren't prepared. And yet we hire leaders that aren't prepared. We would never set up our processes and our meetings to be so ineffective if we thought there was a better way. So when you're in meetings, and I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, 40 people in this meeting. This is a weekly meeting. 2 people do all the talking. There are 38 people doing absolutely nothing. And what you hear from the 2 people that are doing all the talking is berating and blaming, berating and blaming. And everybody's quiet. And then everybody's going to have to scurry back to their world and try to figure out what to do. And the problems don't change. The situations don't change because the way you approach them doesn't change. Now, some of those leaders can make it better with governance and structure and changing their processes and learning some pieces about leadership. There are bad actors who get propped up and sort of become a buffer to senior leadership, or there are bad actors at the senior leadership level and other people are just afraid to call it out. And you shouldn't have to, remember the book Managing Up and the whole concept of managing up? You know who thought about that? People who were taking responsibility for the ones who were up there. It starts at the top. And so the toxic organizations, the most ineffective, are when you're blaming leadership levels rather than getting your house in order at the top and then creating a culture that flows down. And if your people don't see you remove bad actors, they get the message that they shouldn't say something. And they also get the message that either I must have it wrong, they must not be a bad actor, or they're a bad actor and it doesn't matter, my company doesn't care about me. So with this influx of all different ages and different backgrounds, you've got people that now in your companies that it's normal to have real conversations. It's normal to call out a bad actor. So you can change your culture and shift in that direction by doing what we're talking about and then removing the bad actors. You remove one bad actor and sometimes everybody's performance skyrockets. Not just improves a little bit. I've seen it skyrocket. Really, one person was tamping down the entire team. And at levels that you wouldn't believe, companies that you've read about in publications, they have the same issues that you do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, listen, you've already touched on the question I wanted to ask you next to some degree, but I want to provide time for you to elaborate more. We talk about cultures, everybody, it's so important, the tone from the top. And, I don't think there's many leaders, if any, that say, I'm going in there and I am going to establish a terrible culture. That's my goal. It happens. And it happens through sins of commission and omission, I find. So obviously our leaders are all about trying to become better. And there are people that listen, and I'm going to watch you, Dr. Oleson, they're not at the top right now. They hope to be there someday. And they want to establish or continue cultivating a good culture if it's already there. If it's not, how can they do it? So I'm going to ask you, can you give us, our leaders, your best 3 or 4 tips for those that desire to develop a strong, healthy culture, as we would define it, or fix a broken culture? What are your top tips? How can they influence culture in the best way?
Mm-hmm. Well, good news, bad news. In my research, I found out that a team at any level can become high performing, irrespective of the culture that they're in, the pool that they're in, for about 1.5 years. So for about 12 to 18 months, you can perform and do great things within the level of your team. But at some point, 12, 18 months, you're going to need somebody's budget that needs to approve some things that you've been making your own decisions on, or you're going to leave, or your team members are going to change. And so, but the idea that you could start today, start with where you are. A reminder that culture is not something that you create. It shows up. It is the cumulative noticings of the way you operate, who you are, how you sound, what you put up with, what you don't put up with, what you value, what you go after first. Companies that have their values and mission and vision and values on the walls, and employees look at it and go, I have never seen this show up in our company, and it makes them feel weird. So when you're a startup of 20 people, just know that the good news is you set up your company so that you have the pieces that we're talking about for real conversations that head in the direction of what you say you're going to do. You will start to build a culture that has effectiveness and high performance in it. And you can't do that. Remember, at the bottom of the funnel is relationships. You're not going to do it and skip the relationships piece. So as soon as your culture is the kind of place where everyone is affirmed and it's okay to just be who I am, and I have what I need, and I know what you think about what I'm doing, and so I'm able to be successful. That right there changes your culture. It creates a culture that is much different than what it would be if everything was shoved under the rug and people didn't talk at levels below them. Those people down there, they're taking care of that. We just talk to our people up here. And so when you have those pieces in place and you have developed your processes so that you've got autopilot for some of your things and you don't have those evil recurring meetings on your calendar all day, you have time. And when we talk about meetings, there's a quarterly meeting where the team just goes off-site or virtually off-site, and they just talk about how to make things better. They just talk about what has come on our radar in the last, several weeks or months in our industry or in our market, or with somebody that came into our culture and now things aren't going well, or we have an opportunity and we've been missing it. You will begin to shape the culture better because you're going to do things more effectively, and that will naturally create more culture. But then you're going to have more open communication with each other. And then let's say as a female, I might feel comfortable saying, which many of us have had this experience, whatever your background, I'll say something in a meeting and nobody will answer. It'll just be really quiet. And then some person over here says exactly what I said, and the whole group gets really excited and supports them and says, oh, we really should do that. And so in an environment where we've developed the habits of being more open, and we've solved some time issues because now our processes are better and our meetings are better, now I can experiment and I can say, actually, I just said that and I want to make sure that I'm heard. Or the leader can take the time and notice it and be an ally and say, actually, Margie just said that. Let's make sure that we're recognizing, the contributions of everyone. You start doing that and multiply that by hundreds. Pretty soon, 2-3 months down the road, your culture, without anybody saying we got to do something about this culture, it starts to shift. And then when you are always on the, monthly looking and quarterly looking and annually looking at where you're at and where you're going, you can then nip in the bud or continue to go deeper on a cultural aspect that isn't working or hasn't resolved yet, and you can go after it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, you've already talked about this. We've already discussed it before we hit record and then after about the lack of training in corporate America for leadership, and promoting untrained people into leadership roles is the rule, rather than the exception. What do you think? What are the major blocks, obstacles? Why is it so hard? Why does corporate America not embrace the need to train their leaders?
It's one of those things where there's 20 reasons, and every one of them is unfortunately working together to make it really, really firm that we are not going to do something about this. Number one, the companies are disconnected now. And when you're in crisis or you have an opportunity, you're growing so fast and things are just great things are happening, you let fall to the wayside the attention that relationships need, that processes need, even something as simple as meetings need. And when people hear from me or I come in and do an initial assessment of where they're at, they say, well, and I tell them what to do, let's say just for your meetings. Okay, tell you, here's the 4 things you need to do for your meetings, and here's how we're going to work on that, and here's how you're going to be able to change them. They say, oh, we've already done that. Yeah, we did that. That didn't work. And so in their minds, they remember 15 years ago or 2 years ago when they tried a program or they bought something or they took a class or they made something available to everyone. And because they weren't taking into consideration how the brain works, and because they weren't taking into consideration that they needed to set up habits, and because they didn't allow for not everything's going to take, we got to fix some of the things that weren't going to make it smooth. So having a coach or having a proctor, a facilitator, and having people observe, if you don't have that, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you right now, you're on that bell curve. Yeah, you might have some people over here that hit it, lucky, but everybody else by week 2, by week 3, by week 4, it's gone because you're not working with the brain. And so when you want to make these changes, and then the other piece is leaders don't want to talk about making these changes because they're a leader. So how do they admit to themselves and their leaders and their team, their board, that it would benefit them to put some investment into leadership? First of all, everybody says, well, you can't stop the company. And if you take the leaders away, who's going to run the company? No, don't take the leaders away. Do the leadership development in the company. That's the best way. And so you just need help with the how, and you need to invest in it. And it needs to not be a secret that leadership is not natural. And that, as a matter of fact, the reason it's not natural is because we've been trained so badly. So maybe it was natural on the savannah. Maybe it's natural in certain packs. It is not natural for us because we were trained poorly. We learned how to lead in our childhoods. We learned in groups. We learned the way we were parented. That's not a perfect system. So now we come into organizations and we bring all that stuff, and it's not the right stuff. So it's hard for a leader to say out loud, I need some help, or I want my leaders to have leadership development. Because what if my boss says, well, why did you hire them if they're not good leaders? So we just need to come out into the open. And I hope everyone at least trusts that I'm saying you all have the same issues. Everyone's grappling with this. They're just not talking about it. So right now, if you're thinking, oh, I cannot tell my leaders that we need leadership development, just know that every one of your other buddies and family members who are in leadership roles, they're saying the same thing. And those companies that you envy are the ones that got over that and said, we're going to make this investment the way you would make the investment into equipment, the way you would make the investment into getting your recipe right for something that has to be FDA approved. You're going to make sure that your leaders are ready so that they could lead. And then you're going to set up your organization so that you have ongoing development and ongoing refresh. And you promote people that have had this and are going to be good at it. And you start to weed out the people that don't want to.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, listen, the same topic, unfortunately, Margie, I don't see this changing anytime soon. The dearth of corporate training. I hope people start seeing the light, but progress, I expect, will be agonizingly slow. And that's not good news for leaders who aspire to excellence and crave development and training. So I think you'll agree with this. I think that leaders just can't throw their hands up in despair and say, well, my company's not training me, so what can I do? They can actually do a lot. I think everybody is in charge of their own leadership journey. And I would like to hear your thoughts and talk to these leaders. Let's face it, you're talking to the audience, and most of the audience, their companies don't do anything for them as far as leadership development. What can they do? How can a person take charge of their leadership journey? And despite the lack of support from their company, how can they become better leaders on their own leadership journey, on their own horsepower, so to speak?
The first thing I would do is spend some time doing an assessment, work with a coach, do a team assessment. You can find one out on my website. You can just go out there and take the team assessment, get information right away, and just get a sense for where you're at with the way you communicate with each other and the way goal setting happens and how you do your meetings and how you know how you're a team together. And then you can make a case to your leadership or your board and draw very specific connections to, we're going to develop some of these leaders, because what we assess, the data that we have, is that these three things are working really well. People feel really good about our company. They feel really good about our product. They're saying that they've kind of got they think that people's boats are rowing off in different directions, and we want them to come back together and make sure they're rowing in the same direction. And here's why that's important. And then they are saying that they're a little unclear about the company's goals for the year. So we're going to invest a little bit of time to make sure that they have that. And all of the things that I'm saying are the way to develop leaders without saying we're going to start a whole big program that's going to cost $1 gazillion and nobody's ever going to change as a result of it. So if you can use like a scalpel and identify those pieces that the board and the C-suite and your leader wants to improve, and you're saying the how to improve it is we're going to improve our leadership. Everybody is at some level. So I never come in and say, oof, we got to start from the ground up. No, we want to get your processes improved from the ground up if that's what you need to do. But again, we're going to develop leaders by improving our processes. And that kind of language, that kind of conversation goes much better with boards, goes much better with C-suites and leadership teams, because it's not saying anything you've done is wrong. It's saying there really is results at the end of this. All those programs that you remember in the 20, 30, 40 years of your career, this one really will take, because we're going to do the things that we said to do to achieve our goals, and we're going to help develop leaders in the process.
Yeah, I love that. And you've already mentioned as part of your answer, your great answer, by the way, coaches. And I would like to hear your thoughts on your recommendation regarding the importance of leaders at every level of experience, every station on the org chart, so to speak, the importance of them having role models, mentors, and coaches. Mm-hmm. I often find them leaders that have none. They absolutely have none. And so I think that it's a critical element that can greatly aid a leader's journey. What's your thoughts on that? What would you tell the audience on this?
You can imagine that there are many leaders who don't have that because they thought they were supposed to be invincible. They thought they were supposed to know everything. They thought they were supposed to have it all worked out. So if you even sound like you value a mentor, you'd like a mentor, or you want to hire a coach and use the company dollars, you might be giving the impression that you don't have your ducks in a row and that you're not what they thought. And that is absolutely old tapes. That's all that is. That is just old messaging that came in the kind of top-down leadership that's not the military, where there's a reason for the governance top-down, but the top-down meaning just do as I say, not as I do as I say, and don't talk back to me, that kind of thing. I'll send you an email and you do everything I say in the email. No, the truth is that the piece for organizations and being able to treat the leadership in a concrete way is hire a coach. I recommend two things. Number one, every leader needs a coach, and every leader needs a mastermind group. Now, maybe you're in a group from a cohort in college and you just keep meeting, and that satisfies that need for a mastermind group. And mentoring is different than coaching. And some people have mentors and didn't realize that's what that is. But you do want to learn from people that have come before you, or people in different parts of the organization or the industry. But actually investing in a coach and investing in a mastermind group, because you get things from both. Number one, the coach is facilitating you having a conversation with yourself. So most of what you're doing every day is not known to you. If you remember the iceberg and the water line is really high for people who are not aware of what's happening in their day and how they sound and how other people are impacting them. You want the water line to go down. You want to be more aware of what people think when you talk, or you want to realize you actually don't talk at all in most meetings. You might not know that. So you want the water line to go down. You want to become more aware, and a coach is holding up that mirror and helping you know things about yourself. And that's how you're able to change them. And then you want the coach to have the expertise in leadership. And then you want to open yourself up to observation, bring the coach into your meetings, bring the coach into your one-on-ones. Because again, you've told yourself a story to survive, which is, I'm fine. My meetings are fine. My one-on-ones are fine. What I'm doing is fine. I can't get any better because of all those people, or I can't do anything any differently because of A, B, and C. Have a coach there, and it is amazing. It's the learning curve goes pretty quickly when you just start having a coach in your life who can have real conversations with you and point out things. And what I notice is smiles. If I point out something in a conversation after I've observed a leader, and I point out something to them in a way that is receivable, they actually laugh. Oh, I didn't even realize that. I don't even know I do that. And then the mastermind group is the place for you to have peers. You want to have, you'll find that some of the things that you go through, everybody's going through, but you'll also hear differences. And this is the place where you get leadership development, but not in a vacuum or a silo, but literally some of the diversity of industries and thoughts and experiences and styles and brilliance. And so a couple years into a life that has coaching in it and has a mastermind group in it, and you have developed effective leadership in a concrete way, the way you would have learned, say, how to cook.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Well, unfortunately, Dr. Oleson, our time has come to an end. I can't let you out of here without asking the fantasy question that I ask everybody at the end of our interviews. And that is, if you were able to bring back one leader from the past and spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
As crazy as it sounds, I would spend the day with Anne Frank, who is this real person that wrote, and then people wrote about her. And she may not have seemed like a leader at the outside, but the truth is she was leading all day long. She was 12, 10, 11, but she had the pieces about here's what we're going through and here's how I'm making the best of it. And I've often wondered, because I've raised children and now have grandchildren, I've often wondered, where did that come from? And how was she able to draw on her internal? And I would just love to have a conversation with her and have it turn out well, actually have the ending turn out a little better.
Yeah. That's no one has ever selected her, but great pick, because she was a leader in her own right. And look at the impact. I mean, not many people don't know of Anne Frank. So to say that she's a lasting presence in this world would be an understatement. Mm-hmm. So, well, listen, a great interview. I think people are going to want to reach out to you. How do they go about, where can they find you? How do they contact you?
Yeah, so go to www.olsen, Oleson, consulting, consulting.com, and you can go to topteamaccelerator.com and take the assessment and just fill it out and get immediate results and just find out where you place yourself as a leader and you place your team. And then I'm out on LinkedIn. Olsen Consulting is out on LinkedIn, and Margie Oleson. And there are lots of resources on my website and on LinkedIn for you to be able to just start today and do something better for yourself for tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that. And listen, Dr. Oleson, it's been a delightful conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm sitting here and I've got a page full of notes and all that, but I always look at some of the people that I interview you, and you're right there. It's like, I just sit back and it's like just the passion, your knowledge is beyond question, but the passion that you have for this, I just love it,
Thanks,
and I
Mike.
think that's part of what makes you so successful, because when you love what you do, mm-hmm. It's really not work. And so I can see you're such a good fit for what you do. So,
well, and all those people out there, they go to work, and work can be a better place or not, and you impact all those people. So it's really important.
I agree. Well, thank you again. It's been
Thanks,
a pleasure. The audience is going to love it. And I selfishly ask that you consider coming back and doing another episode
Absolutely.
at some point.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Nice to meet you. This has really been great.
it has been. Thank you and be well.
Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.